Yes, good morning and welcome to another session of Obeng Bash series. Today I want to discuss Africa is seen as a risky place to invest globally, and if you're seen as risky, nobody's coming to invest in your country or in your continent or something of that nature. And that's why you see investors are going to Europe, Asia, South America, and they're leaving Africa out. So obviously, nobody is going to do it other than for the Africans themselves. So to overcome the perception of Africa as a risky place to invest and a place to build wealth, Africa must work on issues of how to build global trust. So African countries need to take a multifaceted approach that focuses on improving governance. They must improve infrastructure. African countries must improve transparency, and also they must improve on the regional integration. And for me, I think there's one or two steps that Africa can take to reshape the global image, and of course, this will attract investments. Number one, they must strengthen governance and rule of law. So, rule of law has to be key, it has to be number one. They have to tackle corruption, which means they have to establish clear anti-corruption frameworks, and of course with different institutions, so they have to make the institutions strong. So the institutions must ensure accountability, the institutions must ensure transparency, and of course that will help them improve on their international ranking, and this can influence global investment, it can influence decisions, and of course improving the scores that attract more investors. Another thing that will attract or make African be most trustworthy is a stable political environment. African nations or countries need to demonstrate political stability and also have very peaceful transitions of power from one president to the next without having war. This definitely reduces investment risks. And number three, judicial reforms, which means they have to strengthen the legal system to ensure that enforcement of contracts and property rights provides investors with security, because you don't want to invest in a place whereby you can lose your investment because the judge is not fair or is corrupt. Then, of course, how to de-risk Africa is infrastructure development. African countries must build robust infrastructure whereby they're investing in transport, energy, and digital infrastructure. This will definitely enhance the ease of doing business all across. So, reliable infrastructure is key for supporting industries and reducing operational costs for investors. You know, transportation is one of the biggest pain for any investor in any given country. So, with the infrastructure development, I think public-private partnership or PPPs. So, encouraging these PPPs can accelerate infrastructure growth while sharing the risk between government and private investors. So, private investors can work with the public private partnerships. Then, once it's projects and they can see it's working, then that is one way of de risking uh, a country or a continent. Number three is regional integration and economic cooperation. So, Africans must now leverage the African continent free trade area. So, they must start doing business with themselves. So, there's money whereby they're also investing in within Africa themselves. So, so this African continental free trade area can create a more unified, a more attractive market by reducing barriers to trade and harmonizing regional hubs across the countries. So this would foster economies of scale and improve the continent's competitiveness amongst other countries, or let me say globally. Then, besides this African trade area, they must have cross-border collaboration, where streamlined trade policies and the free movement of goods and services within Africa, whereby even they can have visa-free countries or traveling across Africa. This way, Africa will attract global investors looking for larger, interconnected markets. So, if the markets are connected and you're somewhere in Europe and you're looking to invest, or you're somewhere in North Africa or South Africa and you want to invest in uh, within Africa, you're looking for these interconnected markets. So, African leaders definitely are sleeping on the job because they should be focusing on these things when they're meeting at the AU or UN meetings all over globally. So after that, number four is African countries to de-risk, they must enhance financial and capital markets. So currency stability and monetary policies have to be made stable. Government should aim to stabilize currencies and to keep inflation in check. This reassures investors about the predictability of their return. They want to know if they put $1 billion and the agreement is they're going to get a 1%. They want that stability. They don't want the currency dropped and then the 1% disappeared. So currency stability and monetary policies have to be put in check, and that will make investors predict their income. African countries should expand access to capital. So African nations can develop and diversify financial markets, making it easier for businesses to raise funds and for investors to access liquidity. This is a challenge in Africa. Investors are having a hard time raising funds or getting access to liquidity. It's like the banks, the most important thing is to say no to most people. So they have to expand access to capital for entrepreneurs. They should also promote tools like infrastructure bonds. Infrastructure bonds, diaspora bonds, they rely on their diaspora, and sovereign wealth funding, which can attract domestic and foreign investment while reducing reliance on traditional capital markets. Now, I'm a diaspora. What I mean by infrastructure bonds is for Africans to invest in Africa is not as risky for an American to go invest in Africa. Therefore, for us, by investing in Africa, we are de-risking so the global can see that there's actually businesses that can be done over there. So the governments should promote tools like infrastructure bond and diaspora bonds. And they've been doing this all over the other countries, and African countries are still not taking that seriously. Now, transparency and investor confidence. So, for anybody to do business, investor confidence is key, and of course, trust. So, they must improve data and reporting standards. The company that's going to start doing data in Africa will make huge strides in the next few years. So, by adopting international standards for corporate governance, standards for accounting, and standards for transparency, African businesses and governments can enhance investors' confidence because they're using reliable data, which is crucial for investment decisions. Investors need data before they make a decision. You just can't come and say, I want $1 billion. Okay, where's the data? So Africans should improve data and reporting standards because they want also to be able to operate on international standards. Then they should also have clear and investment policies. There's so many ministries in Kenya, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning. They must have clear investment policies. So African countries should develop and communicate consistent and predictable policies regarding number one, taxation, regarding regulation, regarding incentives, because this will create a stable business environment. They don't Investors don't like whereby they don't know what's going to happen. Regulations change, taxation changes, and these people deal with tricky situations whereby these things have to be steady and standard. So African countries, those that are not there yet, must have their ministers and the presidents definitely focus on these issues. And I know Africans are planning on having a credit rating agency. They can work, with credit rating agencies to improve their ratings for addressing the keys that agencies highlight. In the US, without credit, you can't get a credit card. You can't even buy bread without credit because the credit agencies let whoever is lending you the money know what kind of person you are. Do you pay your bills on time? So Africans should also work with credit rating agencies to improve their ratings by addressing the key risk issues. And I know when I was in New York last week, the Africans are talking about having an African credit rating that is similar but different from what they have in the Western world. So those are the things I think the Africans can work on to de-risk the continent. But I'm not done yet. So building innovation and tech systems. So Africans must promote technology and innovation hubs, like they're doing in Konza, and I think they're doing something in Lagos. Africa is increasingly being recognized as a tech and innovation hub. So, like I say, countries like Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa have very strong startup ecosystems that attract venture capital from all over the world. So, expanding support for innovation and digital transformation can create new opportunities for investors. So, this Konza thing needs to be completed as quickly as yesterday. It's taking longer than normal, but I hear it's on track. But those are kind of things that Africa needs to do so that they can de-risk the continent and create opportunities for investors. They should also encourage investment in green energy. As the world is shifting towards sustainability, this is a good time for Africa to position itself as a leader in renewable energy development, windmills, turbines. This will offer investment opportunities in solar, wind, hydropower projects across the continent. The other way Africans can also use to de-risk or make themselves less risky, or they can build trust with investors, is Africa. They must promote success stories. They need to actively market their success stories, showcasing successful projects, and also how the investors benefited and how they benefited. This will change the narrative and it also highlight potential for returns. So if you have a good story, put it out there. Let the world see. M-Pesa in Kenya is a great story. Every country in the world is trying to copy M-Pesa. That's a great story. Then they should also improve global perception. So African governments can partner with international media. They can partner with trade organizations to reframe the narrative around investment risks, whereby emphasizing opportunities and Africa untapped market potential, which is there in plain, being that everybody in Kenya, in Africa, is a youth, which means this is the future of the world, And this is where all the workers are going to be coming from in the next 10, 50 years. Then the other thing is they must engage the African diaspora. Like I was saying, they should have a diaspora bond or infrastructure bond. So African countries that have a large diaspora, a good example is Egypt, Kenya, South Africa. These countries must leverage on their diaspora because the African diaspora communities are a vital resource for building trust. Through diaspora investment funds, mentorship programs, and knowledge exchange, African countries can mobilize resources and ideas that enhance their credibility on a global stage. And that's why I say a diaspora bond. Creating investment vehicles for the diaspora allows African nations to tap into the trust and familiarity of overseas communities to boost economic development or to boost economies. One other thing African countries can do to promote themselves and get out of the risky area, how to build trust, is also, like I say, work with multinational corporations. Collaborating with global corporations that have a footprint in Kenya will bring expertise, trust, and also to bring resources. This also serves as an endorsement of African investment potential, which is there. So they must also work on local entrepreneurship development, whereby strengthening African entrepreneurship ecosystems ensure that local businesses are invested in and are ready and can partner with global entities. So this will further embed trust, whereby partnerships with global entities will make these global entities more trustworthy, and of course, the investors will come in. So I believe that by improving governance, developing infrastructure, increasing regional integration, and promoting transparency, Africa can change its global investment narrative, and that way they can attract more substantial and large scale investments, changing the entire landscape. So, a combination of these efforts would create a stronger, it would create a more stable, it would create a more stable and predictable environment that de-risks African markets globally. Because if these markets are de-risked, then that is where now investments will start flowing in. So, with those few remarks, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I know it's been long, but this is something that all Africans need to hear across the board, both in the diaspora and also back home. And African leaders need to hear this. Share this as much as you can with your friends, political leaders, because these are things that I learned when I was at the United Nations. And this is what every investor was asking us. Can you guys de-risk Africa? We'll bring in the resources, we'll bring in the know-how. So, with those few remarks, I just want to say thank you very much for listening, and I urge you to wait for the next one um, that I'll bring shortly. And then please share with your friends, like, subscribe to the channel so that when I have a new one, you'll be the first one to get. And also, please um, talk about it with your friends, discuss, and then that's the only way we can get out of the rat race. With that, I just want to say thank you, and maybe I'll see you in the next one. Ciao, and thanks. Bye bye.